Hello, I'm Chilton Knudsen. I'm currently serving as the interim bishop here in the Diocese of Lexington while the diocese searches for the next bishop through a process of nomination and election. That's the process we're in right now, gathering names, screening names, and then ultimately presenting a ballot for the people of the diocese to elect the next bishop. People are asking me nowadays, as you look forward to electing your next bishop, what should we be looking for? What kind of questions should we ask? How do we evaluate when we have several candidates presented to us through the good work of the nominating committee? How do we make a decision? How do we make a judgment so that we can make an election that is faithful? Well, I have a couple of thoughts about that in terms of how bishops are prepared for that ministry, and how we can look at the aspects of a bishop's life and ministry with an eye to the discernment of who God is calling to be your next bishop. I think of the preparation of a bishop in two ways. First of all, there is the professional experience. I would call this the resume. Bishops should have a resume that indicates some pretty broad experience in the church. The church is a unique kind of phenomenon. It isn't exactly like corporate life. It isn't exactly like a family. It isn't exactly like the academy, the academic world. It isn't exactly like a hospital or a social service agency. It's a little bit of everything and more than that. It's the sacrament of Christ's life continuing on this earth through the ministry and mission of the people of God. So it's a unique kind of phenomenon, this thing called church. And so having some vastly different experiences in the church is a good preparation for a bishop, because a diocese contains within itself all sorts of aspects, expressions of church. Large churches, small churches, churches that are more comfortable materially, churches that struggle materially, churches that have one set of sort of dynamics and one kind of ambience, and churches with another kind, and all that variety is rich and wonderful. But bishops are well served, I think, by having a variety of experiences in the church. So the resume is important. My thought is to be looking for variety, not only in terms of the positions that a person has held, but the other things they've done, the extracurricular activities, if you will, mission trips, study, community involvement, artistic expression. Many bishops are musicians, poets, people who plant gardens, build boats, play golf, well or not well. And so the richness of a bishop's experience in terms of activities, interests, and professional responsibilities, that's an important thing to be looking at. Variety. And variety in a different set of contexts, small, large. Variety in terms of kinds of people served, people who have one set of expectations, people who have another set of expectations. So that's the resume side of looking at candidate for a bishop. Another side I call the lived experience side. And this is where dialogue with bishops on diocesan visits can be so helpful. You can read someone's resume, you can read their professional accomplishments, you can read what they've written in answer to questions, but it's the personal engagement during the face-to-face visits that gives you an opportunity to get to know the bishop in terms of life experience. For example, for my own self, if I may be a bit personal here, I think there are 4 lived experiences in my life that prepared me to be a bishop. I began to understand that only after I had been a bishop for a while, but these are things for you to be looking at as you look at potential bishops. First of all, I grew up in the U.S. Navy. which means that I understand order for the sake of mission. The ordering, the hierarchy, if you will, of the military, obviously it has some drawbacks and disadvantages, but it does effectively equip the entity of the military for its mission of protecting our country, defending our liberties. And so my father used to say to me, you never salute the person, you salute the office the person holds. So all of the organization, the order of the military is at its best, admittedly, it may not always be at its best, but at its best is intended to foster the mission, to be clear about who's responsible for what, who answers to whom, who is backstopping whom, what the particular roles are of the component parts, and how the order helps all of the parts work together for common purpose. Living on military bases in my childhood, I would come and go through the gate of the military base, and as we left the base, there was a sign at every base where I ever lived. As we exited the base, we would see the sign. And the sign said, "Lest we forget, our primary mission is to support the fleet." I sometimes think of the church door as having a sign beside it as we exit that says something like, "Lest we forget, our primary mission is to proclaim the gospel in word and deed." But the continuing reminder of mission was a big part of my life as a military child. It also helped me with that issue of variety and diversity, because we were stationed in all sorts of areas, including a lot of foreign countries. It gave me a good background in variety and diversity. The second thing that was especially, I believe, helpful in God's work of preparing me for the ministry of a bishop was my role as the mother of a special needs child. No one chooses to have a child with a disability or handicap, but God does provide grace in that situation. And for me, one of the most grace-filled experiences of my life has been mothering our son Dan. A special needs child asks us as parents and as a community to adjust our expectations so that cookie-cutter type expectations of how children will develop, what their future will look like, we have to let go of those cookie-cutter expectations. They ought to be let go of anyway. But special needs children bring that point home to us. I had to balance my natural protectiveness and sense of sort of mother lion with my son, whose disability made him vulnerable. Had to balance that with my concern that he learn how to live in the world, that he learn how to protect himself, that he feels some sense of mastery and competence. And so also, when a bishop is serving a people, the tension or the desire for balance between caring, caregiving, and challenging, prompting, pushing, is very much a part of the tension bishops live with. Bishops need to be able to affirm and support and care for what is. Bishops also need to be able to prompt people to become what God is calling them to become, to invite congregations that may be stagnant or sliding or stuck, to move into faithfulness, into new directions, to call upon the Holy Spirit's gift for new energy, new vision. So the tension between loving and nurturing and caring and promoting, challenging, pushing was a very important part of what it meant to raise a special needs child. A third part of what has been God's way of preparing me to be a bishop is my life as a woman. Whatever people feel about gender roles in ministry, think being a woman in today's world, particularly as understandings of gender have been changing so much over the last couple of decades, it's been real interesting for me about pioneering work, about walking a path that no one has walked before. There is no roadmap for the unknown. The unknown is always there, inviting us forward into what is unknown and uncertain. It's the call of God to Abraham, Abram as he was before God called him and equipped him to take his life and to move forward. And so being called as a woman in a time of transition about gender understandings really required me to lean on God in a very deep way, to essentially take steps without a clear roadmap, and to take steps that were pioneering steps. I followed in a lot of footsteps, wonderful male clergy who agreed to be mentors, my own parents, particularly my mother, a woman who was a pioneer in her own right. My life as a member of a family with people who had made adventurous decisions. All of those things helped me, but they didn't give me the map that was specific for my journey. Maybe there is no map for any one journey, but being able to put one's foot out in front of the last foot, the next foot, into the unknown is a part of what being a woman in my season of life has helped me to do. And finally, another thing that has helped me enormously and helped prepare me, I think, to be a bishop. Again, this is not the resume material, this is the lived experience material, is my life as a scientist. My original plan for my life was to be a medical doctor. And so I took science courses, pre-medical courses. And I didn't get the grades I needed to get into medical school. I tried to go to graduate school in physiology, thinking that that might upgrade my scores and I might then get into medical school. The wondrous thing was, as I was in graduate school in biology, I discovered how much I love teaching. All graduate students have to do a little bit of teaching. I ended up doing a lot. I loved teaching, but I also loved the rigor of scientific method. I loved thinking about how you could understand the data that you were receiving as you did explorations, and how the data would come together and make some sense, give some meaning or clarity to a question. And so I find that my life as a scientist has given me a curiosity, a kind of attentiveness to the world around me, a hunger to see things make sense and to see how things fit together. And obviously, for all scientists, a real sense of reverence for creation. I know often people think of science and religion as at odds. I think both science and religion are on a quest for truth. I discovered after my life as a scientist that I was still a scientist. I was simply questing for truth in a different kind of way. So rather than going into the laboratory and turning on my microscope or entering into my chemistry laboratory and working with experiments in the search of truth, I found that the truth I was seeking was Christ. And so at that point I accepted the call to enter the pathway of discipleship, which led me here to be talking to you today. So those are some lived experiences that are part of my preparation, maybe a way to understand the non-resume way that the church forms bishops.